What is the best era for like live?
Debatable.
Dead?
So there's two sort of main held eras for the Grateful Dead that are the best, right? Late 70s.
Okay.
And late 80s, early 90s. And so late 70s is sort of a lot of people sort of consider it to be the peak of the double drummer thing, because there's two drummers in the Grateful Dead. And so they're sort of playing off of each other, and one of them is more of a percussionist than a drummer, but they both kind of have full kits, and it's a whole thing, right? So to give you some context, in the early to late 70s, these guys went away from their 60s acid, just full bore, everybody in the room, including the bands on LSD. Who cares what we're playing? We're just like fucking splitting open and,
Right.
Yeah.
In the early 70s, they started listening to a lot of country and a lot of folk music.
Right.
And then they started getting into the really sort of early beginning of jazz fusion.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of co-bills with the fucking Bitches Brew Miles Davis Quintet.
Oh, really?
In the 70s, 72, 73, 74.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so like and these like Miles
makes a lot of
oftentimes they would play on the West Coast, so Miles would open. And the Grateful Dead would like watch them and be like, "What the fuck are we supposed to do after that?"
Yeah.
Chick, like fucking 20-year-old chick. And like, okay. I guess we're just gonna play our songs. So there's a lot of that stuff getting absorbed. That's the thing about the Grateful Dead, I think, is like lost on a lot of people, because in when they were the most popular in the later years, some things got a little sloppy because people had big drug problems.
Yeah.
And amongst other things, there's a lot of money and egos and stuff happening, right?
Yeah.
But to their credit, they did so much absorption, just musical osmosis, because they were such musicians. I mean, these fucking guys saw the fucking Coltrane Quartet in like San Mateo in like 1966. That's in Phil's book. He's like, this tiny club, and they did their first set, and Coltrane walked off stage and played through the whole break. And because we were a band in the area, we were able to kind of like be backstage-ish. And we just like heard him in the dressing room playing through the whole fucking break.
Oh, yeah.
And come back, walk on stage still playing. And these guys are all tuned up on whatever they're tuned up on. So they're just like having out-of-body experience watching John Coltrane in the height of his powers. You know what I mean? And like, you're not going to be not affected by that.
Yeah.
Even if you're a bunch of, fucking Bay Area white guys,
Right.
you're still going to absorb something from
You are
that.
now cultured, whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
It's like a spiritual experience, obviously. It's
And
like,
so,
That's
totally.
the beautiful. Well, it's similar to with Miles too, where
Yeah.
it's just like, dude, the career spans like 50 years or whatever, and it's like every decade.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know, Grateful Dead they didn't have as many personnel changes necessarily as
Not
Miles
even
did,
close.
where it's like
because he just
because it was
had
like
new bands.
It was
every-
like because Miles would just have like a new band like every 5 years or whatever. Be like, all right, get the fuck out of here. Here's a bunch of new guys. Like,
the personnel change in the Grateful Dead only really occurred within the keyboard slot. The bass, drums,
because it was like Bob Weir and
guitar,
Phil Lesh and like all the
all the guitars and the bass and the drums were the same throughout. The only thing that sort of happened is that there was a moment in time from 1971 to 74 where it was only one drummer, and that same guy, Mickey Hart, the sort of percussionist drummer, he joined in 68. Grateful Dead was 65 to 95. So the second era that people sort of hold as the best is the late 80s, early 90s. And so the reasoning behind that for why it was so good was that Jerry got more or less clean. He had a real bad drug problem in the mid 80s.
Okay.
That's the 80s is when he got into heroin. And so he almost died. He went into a coma. Unrelated to drugs. He went into a diabetic coma because he was not only getting fucked up, but he was also a very unhealthy guy.
Yeah.
Cigarettes out the ass, eating hella bad. I mean, he was one of those guys that like pretty consciously earlier was like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah.
So like from 65 to 95, right? What would
30
you
years.
say is your personal like favorite, like of their era? Like, what was
It
your
changes. It changes, but I tend to drift towards late 70s just because I'm such a musician And that's sort of the height of their prowess as
Right.
players.
Yeah, because dude, I'm like a very surface level Grateful Dead, like very casual fan. See, because like everybody's like, no, you got to listen to the live stuff, and I'm like, you scroll through their Spotify, and you're like, it's the same thing with like Frank Zappa.
Hit me
or
up,
like
I'll send
any
you
of
the
that.
good
I'm
shows,
sure.
though.
I know you're the guy for
Yeah.
that. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's like whatever. I just like bought like Terrapin Station or whatever on CD the other day,
And people talk shit on their records. Their records are sick, dude.
and I was like, dude, by the end of it, I was like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah,
they were
who are
it's
these
like
guys?
very prog. I
Yep.
was like, oh shit, I didn't know like they had this whole
They have a depth, man.
element
a
to
real
them.
depth.
Terrapin Station.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's like
Terrapin
what,
is a
like
kind
you-
of turtle.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. The Grateful Dead, more so than I honestly, just beyond being a Deadhead, just if you look at it on a historical level, I think is within the top 3 to 5 most impactful musical acts in rock
Yeah,
in America.
I'd say that's not even like
It's not a
not
controversial
even
statement.
yeah, that's not even
Yeah.
like that controversial because again, it's like they just blew it wide open
Yeah.
with like the
Yeah.
again like I mean you're saying like the proggy elements. It's like they're on that shit just without even like really trying
and,
too.
and the thing is I don't want to say, because it's not that they were musically necessarily super significant culturally,
yeah,
culturally.
Yeah, definitely.
because the thing that they did, the culture around the Grateful Dead, nobody's ever done that before, in terms of basically creating a traveling gypsy colony
Right.
that followed the band everywhere they went. And so that sort of thing sort of started in the early to mid 70s and only grew from there. And then it really exploded in late 80s, 87. They basically, this is funny, they had a music video come out on MTV, the early nascent version of MTV, Touch of Grey.
Right.
I will
Oh, yeah.
get by,
Oh, yeah.
with the
That's the
skeletons
one.
and stuff. Yeah.
That's the one everybody
And so
knows.
check this out. The thing that's funny about that is that it was filmed at one of their shows. They played at this old racetrack called Laguna Seca around Monterey area. And
Yeah,
it
you
was
can
a
drive
place,
past it on
Yes,
the
you
way
can,
to
and you do.
on the way
Yeah.
to like LA or way to the
Yep.
Bay.
if you're going down the 101 for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So that place, they would do multi-night. And that's another thing about the Grateful Dead, which kind of comes back to the Love Mischief, where the Grateful Dead spawned everything that is jam. The ethos, I told you it's more of a mechanical thing than it is a genre thing. It comes from them unequivocally, end of story. They started it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so like they would do multi-night runs at Laguna Seca. And this was at sort of on the way to their height. But what happened was they did like their third night in a row. And again, different set list every show. 2 sets, right? First set. And the other thing is that's all built around psychedelics. Yeah. The reason they would do 2 sets is because when you're on LSD, it lasts for 12 fucking hours.
Right.
So I need music for at least 5 of those.
Right.
So So basically,
So much material. You just got to stretch it.
Well,
I know about that.
and that's the
Yeah.
thing, is that the Grateful Dead over the course of their existence probably played like somewhere close to between 800 and 1,000 individual different songs.
Oh my
Like
God.
in their live repertoire that was cycling in and out of their set lists at any given time, it was at least 200 to 300 songs per tour. Different songs.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's
And
nuts.
also,
I mean, you have to retain that much stuff, and you're so high. Like,
and don't get me wrong, they fucked up royally.
Yeah,
and that was
right.
part of their ethos, is that and that was one of the reasons why they were so endearing to people, especially on psychedelics, is because they're a bunch of crusty fuckers like us, man.
They're like,
They're
I
just
would've-
fucking up as bad as I would have.
I would have
fucked
flipped that
up.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the Touch of Grey video was filmed at Laguna Seca, and they like finished their show, and then they came back out, and they're like, "You guys want to be in a music video?" And their fans were like,
Wow.
right? And so that was that video, was the Touch of Grey. So 87 overnight, they went from having, sold out shows with a couple of thousand people outside that didn't get in, that were just kind of like a gypsy colony following the band and selling food and trinkets and drugs and whatever the fuck, to football stadiums.
Wow. MTV, man.
50, 60, 70,000 people per night, with the same amount or more outside with no tickets.
That's some
so
real
crazy.
life-changing shit.
Yeah,
right there.
yeah. It was basically overnight too. Yeah, and that was where the really dark period of the band began. Because the other thing was that a lot of bad drugs got more sort of intrinsically embedded into
killing
their
everyone.
thing. Yeah, and it was really weird. There's like this, you can almost see it reflected in the band. Jerry's getting worse.
Well,
The scene's getting worse.
So that's like late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, that's where, I mean, it's like at the same time as that is like when the MTV era and like grunge and like hip hop and all this kind of stuff is really taking off. And it's like, bam, lost another one. Bam, lost another one. Bam. It's like
End of
everyone's getting
Reagan.
shot. Everyone's getting
end of
drugged
Reagan
up and dying, overdosing.
into George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a crazy time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Man.
it's pretty wild.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, personally, probably the late 70s. But 89,
To answer your question.
90 is great